guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Esperanza. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm a full-time content creator. So a couple weeks back, I posted two videos. One was a why we left Nashville, and the other was a Pittsburgh pros and cons, and I kind of touched on some of the things I'll be talking about in this video. And in those videos, I actually mentioned that I'd be doing this video, which is basically a story time of how we were trying to buy a house, ended up losing the house, and just like this whole moving nightmare situation. I'm gonna do my best to tell the story without like rambling and hopefully like in a good timeline. That makes sense. I've actually been avoiding doing this video for a while now because at the time that it happened, it was like very emotionally draining, so I just wasn't ready to talk about it then. But now I'm finally sitting down to tell this story time. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Basically, what happened was that we were living in Nashville for I think like 6 or 7 months. We had moved from Portland, Oregon to Nashville because it was just like a less expensive city to live in, cost of living, cost of homes, closer to other cities. There were a lot of like pros as to why we moved there to begin with, but then after being there for a while, we realized that it wasn't like quite the right fit for us, just with all of like the thunderstorms and the tornado warnings and the humidity. It was just not for us. So then we decided that we would move to Pittsburgh, and this was kind of based on the fact that Skylar had been there before when he was like touring with his band and liked it, and then we actually went there together and toured the city and decided that it would be a good place for us to live because it's really similar to Portland, where we had been living for 5 years before we moved to this side of the country, but less expensive to buy homes and all that good stuff. So we decided on Pittsburgh, and then I started looking into homes, and I ended up finding this like really cute house that was in our price range. And so this was like my first venture into even like thinking about the idea of buying a home. Obviously I've been wanting to buy a home for like a really long time just because I'm ready to start a family and stuff, but we've both been like focusing on growing our business and stuff like that. So this was like the first time that we were actually looking into this. So saw the house on like Zillow or I don't know, something like that. And then there was like this button where it was basically like, see if you qualify or something like that. So then did that, said that I did qualify. And then the next thing I think was like, oh, get set up with a loan person or something. So I filled that out, and then almost instantly I got a call from this gal, and she asked me several questions and then basically like approved me to even be able to look at homes, because I guess like at the time, because of the pandemic and everything, it was like the kind of thing where you had to have a paper approval before you could even start to look at houses. You had to already be qualified. So then we actually drove down to look at all the houses. I had like 5 different houses lined up to look at, and then decided on the one. So got back to Nashville, and then we kind of were like, okay, well, let's do this. And so in order to make it work, we were gonna have to break our 13-month lease in Nashville. So we weren't sure if we were gonna be able to find someone to take over the lease, and if we weren't able to, then it was gonna cost us like $6,000, something crazy, to get out of it. So luckily I did end up finding someone to take over the lease, so that was all working out. And then while that was happening, we were already in the process of trying to buy the home, which we had wanted to be like a 30-day turnaround so that we wouldn't have to basically like be paying for a mortgage and an extra month of rent at the same time. And this was like very, very known by the realtor and by the lender. Like they both knew that this was like a huge time crunch. And it wasn't until like half a month in, basically, that so like every single time that I talked to lenders, she'd be like, yeah, everything's great, got your papers, like I'm inputting all the stuff that I need to be inputting, I'm doing what I have to do on my end, everything's good. And so in that amount of time, I'd already paid for an inspector to go out to the house, which was like $500 to like inspect the house and see if there was anything wrong with it. That's like part of the home buying process. The owner of the house had already approved, like accepted our offer, and we'd already put a down payment down on the house by this time. So it was like half a month in. We only had the 2 weeks left before someone was going to be moving into our Nashville apartment, and we were supposed to be, you know, moving all of our stuff over to the house. So by this point, we had gotten like the inspection report back. There were a few things on it, and this is all part of the process. And then at this point, the inspection report had come back, and there were like a few things on it that we were able to like basically, it was kind of like a rebuttal, just saying like, can you fix like these things before we officially buy the house or something like that. So the owner of the home was already working on those things. And like I said, there were 2 weeks left before we were supposed to be moving. And then the lender calls me and basically says that she had like messed up, or that she hadn't actually put in any of my stuff. And so she was assuming that based on all the information that I gave her, that we had qualified. And even though we did, it's a little bit tough when you're self-employed and stuff. So it was gonna end up being like an extra $8,000, I think it was, that we were gonna need for the down payment on the home. And we obviously didn't have that. We like had barely just had enough saved to do I think it was like a 3.4% down for first time home buyer, whatever it was. So we had the right amount for that. We had the amount that she told me from the beginning, but then basically because she didn't do her job properly, we were no longer going to be able to buy the home unless we came up with like $8,000. So that obviously wasn't going to happen. So we had to back out, and this was all the same weekend that we were supposed to be moving. So like days before the house was closing, we finally had to back out, because this whole time we were like trying to figure out ways to make it work. And so I think it was probably not halfway when she let us know. It was like more towards the end, and the entire time she kind of was just like making us think that she was taking care of everything was good on her end. Obviously it wasn't. So then the realtor, I told her as soon as I found out that we weren't going to be able to do it. And then she was basically like, well, I'll let the owner know, like the owner of the house you're buying, but most likely he's not going to like refund the deposit or anything like that. He's most likely going to want to keep it, and which ended up being the case. But the thing about that was weird about it was that I had told her as soon as I found out, and then she said like, okay, like let me let them know, and then hopefully we can get you your deposit back, your down payment back. And then it wasn't until that next Monday that she got back to me and was like, well, you let me know too late. So the owner is refusing to give you the money back. Like he's threatening to sue if you don't give him the down payment money, the earnest money, I guess is like what it's called. Hopefully this isn't like too confusing for you guys. So anyway, that was not fun at all, because all of this corresponding that was going on with her, like via text and phone, was happening literally while we were already like on the road, moving all of our stuff, Skylar driving the U-Haul, me driving the Jeep with Indio and the rest of the stuff. So it was just like such a nightmare. So basically we, at that point, were kind of scrambling and looked up apartments in Pittsburgh like super fast at one of the hotels, one of the nights of the trip. And basically we found like a vintage apartment that we thought would be really cute and like retro, and it was a really great price. And then it ended up taking us like a much longer to get there than usual, because we were driving through, like at the time, tons of like thunderstorms and stuff. I'm like terribly afraid of driving on the freeway, and we had to like also kind of drive slow since Skylar was in the U-Haul, which has to go slower behind me. So it ended up taking us like 3 to 4 days, I think, to get there, like longer than we had anticipated. So when we finally got there to look at the apartment, it had turned out that the rental company had decided to remodel the apartment, and they didn't put the new photos up, they only put the old photos up. So what we thought was like a vintage retro apartment, they had actually completely remodeled and put in like just really ugly stuff. So that was not going to work for us. So then we were like, okay, tomorrow, let's set up some appointments to go see some other apartments, which we did. And none of the apartments at all were working out. And that was just because like something that I hadn't realized was that Pittsburgh is such an old city. So a lot of the apartments are really, really old and just like worn down and stuff. So a lot of the apartments that we were seeing to me were just not going to be livable. So at this point, I think we'd been staying in hotels for like 4 or 5 nights because it took us several days to be able to get times to see other apartments. And then we finally found an apartment that we were like, okay, this is the one, let's go for it. Let's, you know, pay like the application fees. And we were ready to make like the down payment and everything. But then the owner, which we had to correspond like through somebody else, so there was like a middleman, but the owner had told like the middleman people that it wasn't going to be ready for another month basically, which I like don't even understand why it was listed as available. So then I was like, oh my gosh, well that's not going to work, so what is it that's wrong? But apparently it was just that he needed to like move the fridge. And so I was like, well that's not a big deal, like can't we just move in and then that can be done once we're moved in? And basically he completely dropped us because I guess, I don't know, I think it was like some plumbing issues or whatever, but they just basically they didn't want to deal with us. And so they dropped us from that apartment. And this was on the weekend, so we had to continue doing hotels through the weekend. And then I think it was like that Monday that we had been hoping to move into that apartment. Then I think what happened was that we had decided that that was the apartment for us. And then when we heard back, it turned out that we were gonna have to wait like an extra 5 days or something, including over the weekend, before we could move in. So we were like, that's annoying, but whatever, we'll just deal with it because this is the apartment that we want. And then after the 5 days had like gone by, we'd heard back again, basically saying that, yeah, it turns out it's not gonna be ready till the end of the month. So then obviously at that point, we had to back out because that wasn't gonna work. So this had already been like almost a week and a half now, I think. And mind you, living in hotels is not fun. I had all of my house plants, like all 20 of them, in the car in the U-Haul, so we'd have to like move them in and out of the hotels each day. Of course, we had Indio with us, like that was a nightmare, taking him in and out to go to like the bathroom and stuff. We weren't getting any sleep at all. It was just such a nightmare. Obviously, staying in hotels is expensive, and at this point we'd been in hotels for like a week and a half. And mind you, this entire time I was super depressed, just like depressed by the fact that the house hadn't worked out, depressed by the fact that we weren't finding any apartments that were like the right apartment for us, being in the hotels, having that be like a miserable situation, not getting any sleep. It was a nightmare with Indio. And that same day that we found out that we weren't going to be able to have that apartment after all, Indio somehow ended up having like terrible diarrhea that night. So that's like kind of a side note, but basically like we woke up to like a terrible smell, and basically like Indio had completely had diarrhea like all over the bathroom floor, had to clean that up. And then I had him in the bathtub and I was trying to like clean him up, and I pretty much completely washed him, and then he actually had diarrhea again, and this time all over my foot. So I had like literally a mental breakdown, like crying just in the bathroom tub, just like thinking like how miserable like the whole past couple like weeks had been. So just not pretty, not nice times. My phone keeps running out of space, so I have to keep on like stopping and starting. But basically I think at that point it was a brand new week, and I checked all of like the rental agencies again just to see if there was like any new listings up, and then I ended up finding a listing that seemed perfect, and it's actually for the apartment that we're in now. And we ended up doing it sight unseen, and really quick turnaround, like that whole, like I think that same day she like approved us and everything. And then at that point we'd had to put all of our stuff in like a U-Haul storage because we just couldn't keep driving around the U-Haul for like 2 weeks. So all of our stuff was sitting in storage at the time. So we went and got all of our stuff and we were able to move in, I think that same day or like within this same couple of days. But then when we got to the apartment, we realized that the power wasn't working and the water wasn't working, nothing was working. So I let the landlord know, and it actually wasn't for like almost a week, I think, before she was able to get like all the people in to fix all those things. And they also hadn't cleaned the apartment, which she didn't tell me. So there was just like dust and crap everywhere. She didn't end up giving me a credit for having to like clean the entire apartment and for basically not having like any power or electricity for an entire week. We had to keep eating out that whole week because we didn't have a working fridge or a working range or obviously anything. So and then I think basically when we were moving in, it was the hottest day in Pittsburgh, and our apartment is at the top of a house, so it's like the loft of a house. So we had to move all of our stuff up like 3 flights of stairs. We were so sweaty, only to find out that we couldn't even shower because our water wasn't working. That's literally how we found out that the water wasn't working and that nothing else was working. And I think the day that we moved all of our stuff into the apartment, it was the hottest day in Pittsburgh, and we had to move our stuff up 3 flights of stairs, actually 4 if you include like the outside one, because we're actually the loft of like a 3-story house basically. So we were so sweaty, and I went to go take a shower and the water wasn't working. So that's how we found out that we had no water, and then we tested the other things and found out that those weren't working either. And they actually were able to get the water on, I think, after the weekend. So we went through the weekend being super sweaty and stinky, and then they were able to get the water on that following Monday, I think, but then it flooded the apartment below us, so they had to turn it back off again and fix that whole situation. So it was just kind of a nightmare. And it was really funny because when I found the apartment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And we were able to get in so soon. It just seemed like too good to be true. And obviously there was a reason why they were trying to get us into the apartment really quickly. So, but after that was all said and done, I'm finally getting the apartment to look the way that I want it to, and it's starting to feel a lot more like home. But it was just like thing after thing after thing. It was literally just like when it rains, it pours, and just not like a very fun situation. So we're not intending to buy a home for probably like another year or so. It just depends. But one thing's for sure, now we know exactly what to expect. It just makes me kind of sad because obviously we were first time home buyers. We didn't know like anything about the process or how it worked. And I feel like the realtor and the lender both did like not a good job of informing us on decisions and like how the process worked and everything. So inevitably it failed, but I think now we're going to be so much more prepared for when we actually do buy a house, and we'll know everything to expect, like financially, how the process works and everything. So we'll be much more prepared the second time around. So that is it for this story time. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I have a few other story times if you guys are interested in watching them. I'll link a few in this video so you guys can watch them. But if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you guys aren't subscribed to my channel already, please be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.